Quote, taken together, the numbers indicate that states using their authority to lock up people in a mental hospital is a powerful form of social control, creating a system of racial segregation. According to Curtis Decker, Executive Director of the National Association of Protection and Advocacy Services, if you want to control people, what better way to use than the disability system? Well, psychiatry is the ultimate disability system. Quote, blacks can comprise almost 37% of all involuntary commitments to state mental hospitals, but only 19% of the population in the surveyed states. So we have blacks being locked up more often than whites. Why? What have they done? Well, A, they're black, and B, they speak out. Let's look at some of the black crime statistics. Black crime trends, black violent crimes, murder, negligent manslaughter, forcible rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. Between 1986 and 91, while blacks made up only 12% of the population, they accounted for over 44% of the arrests for violent crime. In all categories of violent crime, blacks accounted for a higher proportion of arrests based on population than whites, even though blacks accounted for only 12% of the population. And I have it year by year. For charges of murder in 1991, blacks were overrepresented by 8 times, 800%. Blacks were arrested for murder and negligent manslaughter in nearly 55% of the cases. In 1990, black youths under 18 accounted for 15% of the total youth population, yet 57.4% of the arrests were homicide. In 1991, 1,009 out of every 100,000 black adolescents were in police or court custody, compared to only 287 for every 100,000 whites. Then you say, well, doesn't that justify then that blacks are inherently more violent? No, it does not, because then you have to take a look at who's being targeted and who's being sent to jail, who's being released without being charged. And it is consistently whites are not being targeted, white crime is not being targeted, and even white violent crime is not being targeted, but black crime is. So the statistics we've been told that show that there is a violence initiative and we should be directed towards black is itself a fraud. Let me quote from Dr. Frederick Goodwin. Goodwin joined the National Institute of Mental Health as a clinical associate in 1965. Between 1981 and 88, Goodwin was the director of the National Institute of Mental Health's Intramural Research Program. From 1988 to 1992, he was the director of the now defunct Alcohol, Drug Abuse, and Mental Health Administration. His infamous February 1992 racist speech drew so much fire from black groups, including the NAACP and the Black Congressional Caucus, that the funding for the proposed violence initiative was never made. But he voluntarily stepped down as director of the National Institute of Mental Health, director of one group to become director of the National Institute of Mental Health. And he remained the director until 1994. So even after making one of the most blatant racist statements ever by a public official, he was promoted up. Let me give you his exact quote. February 11th, 1992. He was the head at that point of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Alcohol, Drug Abuse, and Mental Health Administration. You listen to it yourself. Quote, if you look, for example, at male monkeys, especially in the wild, roughly half of them survive to adulthood. The other half die by violence. That is the natural way of it for males, to knock each other off. And in fact, there are some interesting evolutionary implications of that, because the same hyper-aggressive monkeys who kill each other are also hypersexual. So they copulate more, and therefore they reproduce more to offset the fact that half of them are dying. Now, one could say that if some of the loss of social structure in this society, particularly within the high-impact inner-city areas, has removed some of the civilized evolutionary things that we had built up, and that maybe it isn't just the careless use of the word when people call certain areas of certain cities jungles, that we may have gone back to what might be more natural without all the social controls that we have imposed upon ourselves as a civilization over thousands of years in our society. During the same speech, Goodman revealed plans for a national violence initiative. The initiative involved a principally biomedical approach that would use 100,000 inner-city children, mainly blacks, that focused mainly on brain neurotransmitter chemicals like serotonin and their role in violence. He wanted to use this as a way of identifying these people so they could receive psychosurgery, meaning lobotomy, and so they wouldn't be violent later in life. So that's what we have. So it's not difficult to take a look today at psychiatry and look at its founder and the founder of the American Psychiatric Association and see how leading physicians, psychiatrists, behavioralists, eugenicists, and their legislative colleagues have together created an idea that somehow African Americans have a lower IQ, are incapable of the same intellect, the same sensitivity, the same awareness, and the same capabilities as Caucasians. This is the basis, all documented, of this report. Dr. Mark Barber, instrumental in the production of this report, and I also want to give special acknowledgement to the Citizens Commission on Human Rights, one of the few organizations in this country that cares enough to tell the truth to the American public on these issues. I thank them for their cooperation. I'm Gary Null. Hope you've enjoyed a look at something that is never discussed, never revealed, and continues to be perpetuated: institutional racism in the United States. I want to thank you all. We will look forward to going back to our regular schedule.